recovering from her surgery, and her the Halls are down there visiting with them. Other folks are on the road, the Howards up in Tennessee. We have a number of people that have been sick, recovering from various surgeries and all. It's great to see Emma back with us today. She's been on the ailing list, and Joy is
Joy has had a relapse of whatever
okay.
she had, the flu, sinus, whatever.
Okay. Yeah, we never did figure that out, whether she had flu.
She tested positive for flu.
Okay.
She tested for sinuses and stuff. She's out sick.
Okay. Yeah, keep Joy in our prayers. Hope everybody has weathered all this cold weather fine with no water issues or power issues and stayed warm. Is there anything else before we begin class?
All his tests have come back from him. The medicine he's been taking for his Crohn's is finally not working anymore. It's taken 50 years, so they're in the process of getting him on a new one. He's in the fourth year today.
Okay.
Today on County Health.
Okay. Kevin's results has come back from all his tests, and the medication that he's been on for a while is now not working, and they're going to have to figure out a different plan of attack for that. So, anyone else? David, would you lead us in a prayer, please?
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this beautiful Lord's Day we have to be out, come here to worship you, Father. We're thankful that we have this opportunity and have the good help to be here. We are mindful of this fun time, Father, those who are not as fortunate as we are in health, who are in hospitals, have had surgeries, or sick at home. Those that are also traveling, Father, be with all of them, Father. Let them be safe. Let them get the help that they deserve and they need, they want, Father. Let them be with their families and they take care of them. Father, as we study from your word this morning, let us have fertile minds and hearts that seed might be planted, that we might be better servants of thine in the future. Be with Larry as it leads us. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Over the past quarter, we have been studying from a book called Let's Go Visiting, and through that we have looked at visiting the sick, visiting those shut-ins, visiting new people to the community, a whole lot of visiting going on. And the last chapter of the book, chapter 14, the more I looked at it, the more I decided that I wasn't going to cover it today, because all that chapter does is list other ways to do things. And since we're already in the process, we haven't done it for several years for a variety of reasons. We haven't had teams here to take care of things, and that's going to change next year. We're in the process of setting up those teams. Also, as those teams go into effect, what our current plans are is to have 4 teams, and we have 4 deacons, so there would be a deacon heading each team. We have 5 elders, so there would be an elder teaming up with a deacon, and the one to spare would be roaming around between the 4 teams. And then on a periodic basis, and I don't know if we've really nailed that down yet or not, maybe 6 months or whatever, the elder and the deacon would switch teams. And the whole process of this is to try to get people more involved with not only with each other, but looking out for each other, looking out for the whole congregation. And as it goes into effect also, don't think that it is set in stone, because anytime you start a new program, you're going to find out that there's something going on that you hadn't expected, and you have to make adjustments along the way. So if you see something that you think could improve, make sure that you talk to either the deacon or the elder over that team at that time and work it out, because what we want to do is come up with the best possible plan that we can for Grandview Pines. Grandview Pines is different than any other congregation in the world. So each congregation has to do what works best for that particular location. So today what I want to do is go back and start with the questions and build on this from chapter 13. So if you've got your book, if you would turn to page, whatever it is, 33, the very first question says, how can we get people to see the need for personal evangelism? How can we get people to see the need for personal evangelism?
You have to continue to preach on these subjects quite often. Probably, have more Bible studies geared towards helping us to understand the very need to do so, how it relates not only to saving souls, but for us to work out our soul salvation as well. Because it goes hand in hand.
You are correct. All that needs to be reinforced, but I think there's a step earlier that we need to look at. I'm sorry? That works, but I can even go back to Old Testament for mine. What does Ezra...
One thing we need to, two comments here. One thing is it's kind of cliche-ish, but we've always said, go thee means go me. We need to convince them of that. And also, let people see that there are people in my life that you'll never see, that you'll never have an opportunity to teach. Same way with everybody in here, there's people in your circles that you're the only one they're ever going to have contact with.
Well, the phrase that I put down, and I'd given this considerable thought just how I wanted to start this class out, everything external starts internal. And I go back to Ezra 7:10. What does Ezra 7:10 say? What's the first thing Ezra did? Prepared his heart. So, if we want to instill, as Brother Moore said, if we want to keep encouraging other people to do this and the importance of it, the first thing is we got to believe it and we got to do it. We lead by example, not, and again, that old trite saying, don't do as I do as I say type thing. But the first thing we've got to do is we have to understand just how important it is. And then we can go out and talk to other people and encourage other people. How many of you have ever been in sales? Who makes the best salesperson? Believe in your product. If you believe in your product, you can sell your product. And if you don't believe it, you're not going to have as much success. And again, that's where I go back to Ezra. First thing we have to do is prepare our own heart. And then, what did he prepare his heart to do? He prepared his heart to learn, and then he prepared his heart to do. And then I think we can...
You run into people day after day after day. You run into people day after day after day. We don't care about it. Their soul. We're not going to change as far as...
Question. How does Hebrews 5:12, you ought to be teachers. You need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracle of God. And you have come to need milk and not solid food. How many, and don't name names, don't even name locations you've been, but most of us in this auditorium right now have been members of the Lord's church for quite a while. Some of us have been at various congregations. Can you think of situations where there are pew sitters and not church workers? Like I say, don't name names, don't name congregations, but again, I think this goes back, I'm leaning on Ezra again, to prepare our own heart. How many of us still need milk and are not ready for the solid food? And if you're not ready for the solid food, how are you going to be ready to go out and teach those that just need milk at the time, the new ones? How are you going to go out and teach if you still need to be taught? Yes, sir.
We see it in personal lives where somebody's in an exercise program or something. They're always, pushing to add more, grow it, keep going that way. You see it in your professional life where if you're not learning something and creating skills, you're stagnant. You're staying in the same place. There's nowhere for you to grow to. But people don't relate that to their spiritual life. They think once you're in the water, one and done.
Well, I've used this example many times that your spiritual brain is like a sponge. Well, your brain's like a sponge anyway. But what happens with a sponge? When you introduce it to water, what happens? When you take the water away, what happens? So it's the same thing spiritually. You're either growing or you're shrinking. There's no stagnation. There's no, I've reached that point and I'm there. You're either constantly growing, and if you stop growing, then you start shrinking.
Another example for that sponge is it only holds a certain amount of water.
And it only holds it.
What are you filling it up with?
But you got to keep it. You got to keep it there to keep it full. Okay. The next question. What is the work of the church? What is the work of the Lord's church?
Spread the gospel.
Spread the gospel. What else? Is that all?
Save souls.
Anything else?
Ephesians 4:12 classifies it in three different ways. It says, for the perfecting of the saints, the work of the ministry, and for the edifying of the body of Christ.
I've broken it down in, that's correct, and I've broken it down into basically three things. The work of the church is edification, which is what we're talking about here. We need to work to grow, build each other up. Benevolence, we need to take care of our own, take care of everybody we can, but particularly our own. And then evangelism, that's the three broad categories that I've got it broken down into. I'm starting with Mark 13:34. If you'll go to Mark 13:34. I'm a little slow today. I'm breaking in a new Bible. It doesn't know my fingers yet, so bear with me. Mark 13:34, where it says, "It is like a man going to a far country who left his house and gave authority to his servants and to each his work and commanded the doorkeeper to watch." Now, why did I start here? The parable that we're looking at is basically it is like a man, and the man is who? The man is Christ. He's going to a far country. Christ is going to heaven. And what does he leave behind when he goes? The church. And what does he give authority to the servants to do the work, and commanded the doorkeeper to watch? See, when Christ left this earth to go to be with the Father, who did he put in charge of his body, his church? Huh? Christians. And there's work for us to do, and then that work encompasses the things that, I found a quote, and I wish I could have found out who wrote it, because I think it is very appropriate for what we're talking about. Let me read this to you. And like I say, I don't know who wrote it. Let us not be ashamed to declare the whole gospel, the whole counsel of God. Let us not be ashamed to declare the whole counsel of God. Where do we find something similar to that? Romans 1:16, for I am not ashamed. So he says, let us not be ashamed to declare the whole counsel of God. Men's souls are at stake, and this is what Brother Clance just said. People's souls are at stake. Human lives are precious. Upon whose shoulders does this responsibility rest? It rests upon the shoulders of those who claim membership in the church of the Lord. These things, which all the work of the church, these things alone are the work of the church. I particularly like the phrase, it rests upon the shoulders of those who claim membership in the church of the Lord. Because when he left this earth, he left us in charge, and we are supposed to be the ones that take care of edifying each other, building each other up, benevolence, taking care of needs, and evangelism. When we get to edification, let's look at Romans 14:19. Romans 14:19. First one there can read it, please.
So then we pursue the things which make for peace and the building up of one another.
We make for peace and building up of one another. Also, 1 Thessalonians 5:11.
Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do.
What does the word edify or edification mean? Lift up, build up, increase someone's knowledge, increase someone's morally, increase someone spiritually, but build up. And since we're talking about church, we're talking about build each other up spiritually. Also, that can work with knowledge. When we look at benevolence, let's go to Galatians 6:10. Again, first one there, please.
As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith.
Do good to all, especially those the household of faith. Does that remind you of the second commandment? When Christ was asked what's the greatest commandment, what was the first commandment? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and the second is like unto it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If there's any other commandment on these, it hangs on love your neighbor, different place. James 1:27.
Before we read that,
Yes, sir.
some of our brethren in congregations will not give benevolence to people outside of their own congregation, which that verse that's contrary to that verse.
I'm wondering why that is. I think that verse is pretty plain. Do good to all. I'm sorry?
What was the scripture you pronounced?
James 1:27, sorry. James 1:27.
Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world.
Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this. And we've been talking this whole quarter about visitation. What does visitation mean? It doesn't mean to go by and say, hi, how you doing? I'll see you next week. What does it mean? Visiting in this sense? Observing, checking out how things are, and taking care of needs. Acts 1 and start with verse 27 through 30. Acts 1, 27 through 30. That don't work. There's not 30 verses. Acts 11, excuse me.
Breaking into the glasses too late.
No, they're breaking me. Acts 11, 27 through 30.
Now at this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, named Agabus, stood up and began to indicate by the Spirit that there would certainly be a great famine all over the world. And this took place in the region of Claudius. And in the proportion that any of the disciples had means, each of them determined to send a contribution for the relief of the brethren living in Judea. And this they did, sending it in the charge of Barnabas and Saul to the elders.
This past year, we sent money all the way to the Philippines to help them. We also have helped locally. I think personally this congregation does a great job at trying to help. There were many other situations where we looked at trying to help, but the people, when we contacted them, they had already been flooded with a number of other sources taking care of them, and they didn't need. Does that mean that we're to just sit back and say, well, everything's going to be taken care of? We've got all these other people taking care of them, or do we still need to try to reach out every time we know of somebody that needs and help if they need? We can't become complacent. We still, even though in that one situation, particularly I'm talking about Kentucky when they got hit with all the flood and everything, we got it together and we was going to do it, and when we contacted them, everything was taken care of. Did we just stop? No, that's when we heard about a need over in the Philippines and the money and everything that we had prepared for Kentucky that they didn't need, somebody else needed. So if we're going to do the work of the church, we need to stay constantly vigilant and, if at all possible, take care of the needs or take care of them as much as we can. Questions, comments?
I'll throw it out here right now. We need to find some contact in Ukraine. We have a letter, we got a letter from one of our missionaries that we had contact with before that still sends us updates. Those brethren, they are hurting.
Well, we have sent money to the Ukraine to help with that work over there. But if there's more need, we need to take a look at taking care of that. So, any other questions, comments on benevolence? So we've looked at edification, we've looked at benevolence, and then the third work, evangelism. And I'm imagining everybody in here can quote from Matthew and both from Mark. What's it tell us to do? Go ye into all the world and teach everyone the gospel. And where does that into all the world begin? I'm still looking for a way to put a sign up on that back, on the back there, is you're now entering the mission field as we walk out the door. So maybe I can get to it one of these days. Okay, so the work of the church then is threefold: edification, benevolence, and evangelism. There's a number of other ways you can phrase it, but basically I think those cover the main three missions. Questions, comments before we move to the next question? The next question then was, how is God glorified according to John 15:8? Well, first off, we've got to read John 15:8, don't we? John 15:8.
Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, so shall you be my disciples.
Okay. How's God glorified? By us bearing much fruit. And how do we bear fruit? We do His work. And that falls under the categories we just listed there. Look at Romans 7 and verse 4. Romans 7 and verse 4. Says, therefore, my brethren, you also have become dead to the law through the body of Christ, that you may be married to another, to him who was raised from the dead, that we should bear fruit to God. So, the question was, why has God saved us? To bear fruit. He saved us because He loved us. He wants us all to be with Him in heaven. That's number one. But the second thing is, once we're saved, we don't just sit back and relax and say, well, I'm going to heaven. I don't care what happens to the rest of the people. He saved us so that we could bear fruit or go save others.
I guess two different areas. You look at Galatians chapter 5, we talk about the fruit of the Spirit. There's also a big part of it that we're emphasizing as far as fruit being souls.
Yes, sir. Well, that part goes back to what we've talked about in the work, edifying. We're building up. We're increasing our knowledge, growing the fruit, and then the reaching out. number 6 is sort of a generic question that says, is training important in soul winning, and why? Is training important in soul winning? Must be, or it wouldn't ask why, correct? Why is it necessary? Why is it important that we train to save souls?
So we can rightly divide the word of truth for those who need it. Because if you're not trained, you can do more damage than good. You can confuse a person, some awful. You may not have an opportunity to go back and correct all of that if you're not careful.
Well, you're absolutely correct, and I broke it down just a little bit simpler for my mind, and I got to thinking about all the things I've done throughout my lifetime, and I haven't done anything without training. I walk. How did I walk? I was trained to walk, right? Huh? I fell a bunch of times, but I learned to walk by continually walking. How many of you got a driver's license without ever going and taking a test or studying or practicing? The job you do, the way you make a living, was you trained for that? So training is essential because, in my opinion, you learn the right way to do things, which is where you were going with that, rightly dividing the word. You learn the proper way to go about it. Yes, sir.
You can't teach what you don't know.
Correct.
It all starts, it's said this before, but it bears saying again. I've got to make sure as much of myself is in line with the gospel as I can before I go out to teach others. Not to say that we'll be perfect, that we've got to be equipped ourselves before we start to make it with other people.
Well, since you said that, what is the greatest hindrance to our going out and talking to somebody about the Bible? Pardon? Ourselves, but what about ourselves causes us to be timid about talking to someone about Scripture? Fear of rejected and lack of knowledge. Was Christ ever rejected? Wasn't he the greatest teacher of all? So why should we fear rejection? We cannot compare to Christ. We can try to emulate him and be like him, but we can never attain that stature. So if the greatest teacher of all that ever walked this earth had failure repeatedly, why should we be afraid of failure?
He even already told the apostles in the 70s, he sent them out, that you go into a city and they don't receive you, they're not going to listen to you. Shake the dust from your feet.
Shake the dust of your feet and move on. It didn't say if you get rejected, turn around and come home. Yes, sir.
I had it put to me one way, talking about something completely different, just as I was here. We know what to do, we know what to say, but oftentimes we still are afraid and we worry, because unfortunately that's part of being human. Fortunately for us, Christ understands and intercedes with God for us. And that's why we've been blessed with tools that we have to overcome those things in us. But in doing so, we learn how to help other people overcome the same thing in their own life. Because what is it that often keeps people from obeying the gospel? The same thing. Fear of rejection from family or friends, and I can't possibly know enough to live right.
I can't know enough, or I'm not good enough, or I've been too bad, or all of that. Yes, ma'am.
But training is important, and even with training, some people can't teach. As an educator who trained educators, there were people who were brilliant on their subject matter, but they did not have the ability to break that subject matter down in such a way to make it presentable so that someone could understand. Where there were others who had to study their subject matter every night for the next day, but they could deliver it like they knew it backward, forward, and inside out. So training is important because it allows you, one, to understand the process of teaching, but it also helps you to understand whether or not that is one of the gifts you've been given. You may just have to be a waterer, not the planter, or, do you see what I'm saying? We all have different talents.
Yes, ma'am. And the Bible even tells us that some were this and some were that and some were the other. I hesitate to, well, no, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Many years ago, when I was first taught survival skills and fighting, I was taught that the first thing you need to do is understand your knowledge and your ability. And the second thing you need to do is understand your limitation and not exceed your limitation, which goes right along with what you're saying. So, with the Bible telling us that everybody was given different talents, if someone knows that they can't teach, but they can approach somebody and get them interested, then they can hand off to one of them that is capable of teaching that way. So it's all a big team. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and hand off. And to get to Brother Moore's comment about the one of the problems we have is our lack of knowledge. What is the greatest strength that we have when it comes to lack of knowledge? I know that sounds a little bit warped. I admire, I won't say I envy Brother Clarence, because envy is wrong. I wish I could do what he does, but I wish he could do better. But he can practically quote the scripture to you. Now, I know that certain things are in this Bible, but if you ask me to give you book, chapter, and verse, I can't do it. Now,
We have to look it up.
when I have to look it up. Now, when I get this Bible broken in the way I had my old Bible broken in, and you ask me a question, that's, well, it's on the left page, it's on the right column, and it's at the top of the column, but I couldn't tell you book, chapter, and verse. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna play the devil advocate here for a second.
Okay.
Everything that we've said is good, and we do need training to be better, but if we know enough to obey the gospel and be saved, we don't know enough to share. We had a man a long time ago that was baptized. He studied with one of our members and was baptized, and he wanted to convert his family. And one of our members said, no, we have an evangelism class. We need to go to that first. His family was never converted.
No, because he would have had an in, whereas getting them some. And that's why I go back to the Bible, even what Sister Kay said there. If the person doesn't have the ability to teach, if they're asked a question and they've got the Bible in their hand and say, well, read this. Let the Bible do the talking. We don't need to try to rationalize it or formulate the ideas. The teaching is all right there. All we have to do is be familiar enough with the Bible to know where to find it.
Be a guide.
We're the guide. Yes, sir.
So both of those things may be true, but both of those things can be better learned. You can't just say, oh, that's not my thing, stop. There's still effort needs to be put in there. Counterbalance that. I think we often overcomplicate the matter of teaching the gospel. There's a reason when you see it in the New Testament, it's equated to planting seed.
Right.
In the first century, it was not as complicated as farming is today. They just spread seed wherever they were. Whatever they were doing, that's what they did. Wherever it fell, it fell.
I think the technical farming term is they broadcast.
That's all we're told to do, to begin with. And we've got to start before we get to the full. Does that make sense?
It does, because I believe in the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. But I think also that, and I hate to keep beating up on Ezra, but I keep going back to Ezra, because if we don't prepare our hearts correctly, then all of this, when it comes down to running into a difficult situation, I hadn't had enough training. You're going to find an excuse, but if you have got your heart prepared, you're going to work through any problems and find a solution to it. The last question was, what does, and we'll have to read 2 Timothy 2:24. 2 Timothy 2:24.
The servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient.
So the question is, what does 2 Timothy 2:24 teach us about our attitude toward the lost?
We add verse 25 to the finishing.
Okay.
It says, in meekness, instructing those that oppose themselves, God peradventure will give them the penance, the acknowledgement of the truth.
So what does it teach us about the lost, our attitude toward the lost? Number one is patience. What else? Meek. Gentle. What does the word gentle mean in this particular sentence? Why should I be gentle talking to someone about their salvation, their soul? What if they have a completely bad idea about what's going on? Well, once saved, always saved. I'm going to heaven. Don't care what the book says. Can we still be gentle when we try to correct them?
That's quite easy with tomatoes or something like that. If you're not gentle with the plant, you're going to break off what might produce fruit.
If you're not gentle with certain vegetables or fruits, you're going to destroy them.
Also, I'm finding again that being patient and gentle with a baby bears much fruit. Because I'm watching and seeing how an attitude that's not gentle creates strife and discourse with baby. But if you sing a song and you're gentle and you're soft, the anger and the frustration goes away from the baby. That's the same way with a person trying to teach.
I think you're right, and I think one of the things that would help us in that is we have to understand that the person that is lost, when we try to talk to them and they won't listen, they're not rejecting me. Who are they rejecting? God. Where are they on their scale of knowledge? they're the infant, we have to be gentle as they are, as if they were a baby. So gentle, meek. What does meek mean? We're not trying to tell them we're better than they are. We're just people. If we let the Bible talk instead of us, again, that helps in that meek part, because I'm not telling you anything. God's talking to us. So gentle, meek, and patient. Long-suffering. We can add that one in. Thank y'all so much for your comments, your attention. And thank you for being here on today.